My name is Ariana Holt, and the day I buried my husband was the day his family showed me how cold they could truly be. While I stood in the funeral home trying to hold myself together, the director pulled me aside and told me my in-laws had called earlier. They instructed him not to publish any obituary for my husband because they said I was not real family. They said only blood had the right to speak for him. I thought I had misheard. I paid for the service. I planned every detail. I held my husband's hand as he took his last breath, yet his own family wanted to silence me at the very moment I needed to honor him. That was only the start. Before the day ended, I learned they had taken something from his name that I never agreed to. They turned my grief into a battle I never asked for, and the revenge I gave them in return ended every connection we had. If you are watching this, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. This story is heavy, and I want you with me all the way. Before everything fell apart, my life with Marcus felt steady and warm. He was the kind of man who stayed after school to help students who struggled, even if it meant coming home late. He fixed neighbors' flat tires, mowed lawns for families going through tough times, and never expected praise for any of it. He brought peace into every room, even when I brought stress. I was the worrier in our marriage. He was the calm that carried me through every storm. But his family never accepted me. From the day we married, his father, Gerald, treated me like an outsider, wearing a visitor's badge. He once looked me straight in the eyes during Thanksgiving and said, "You married into us, but that does not make you one of us." His mother, Sylvia, watched silently and only spoke when she needed something from Marcus. She rarely used my name. She called me her, or your wife, never Ariana. Then there was Tara, his older sister. She acted like Marcus belonged to her and her parents alone. She once told me, "He listens to you too much. You changed him, and not for the better." She said it with a smile, as if it were a joke, but everyone in the room knew she meant it. I was not perfect either. I pushed Marcus to stand up to them more often. I nagged him about their disrespect. I told him he needed to stop letting them walk all over him. He always answered the same way. "They are stuck in their ways. Let's keep the peace while we can." I regret how hard I pushed. I did not know I would lose him before anything changed. When Marcus collapsed from a sudden heart condition, I rode in the ambulance alone. I held his hand as the doctors tried to save him. I whispered to him, telling him I was there. He never opened his eyes again. 2 hours later, long after Marcus was gone, his parents arrived at the hospital. Gerald did not even look at me at first. He looked past me, straight to the nurse's station, like I was in the way. Sylvia cried softly, but she never reached for me. Tara asked questions about Marcus's medical history, as if she had been involved in his life every day. Not one of them asked if I was all right. Not one of them sat with me. I walked out of that hospital believing the worst part of my life had already happened. I did not know the deepest betrayal was still waiting. If you want the next part, keep watching and make sure you are subscribed so you never miss these stories. The conflict began the moment I walked into the funeral home to finalize the last details for Marcus's service. I believed the hardest decisions were behind me, but the director, Mr. Sanford, stood up when he saw me and pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose in a way that told me something was wrong. His voice was gentle, almost cautious. When he said my in-laws had called that morning, they told him not to prepare an obituary under my name and not to accept any written tribute from me. They claimed only immediate Holt blood had the authority to speak publicly about Marcus's life. Hearing that, I felt the room darken. I had already been awake for nearly 2 days, juggling phone calls, paperwork, and the crushing weight of losing the man I built my entire life with. To hear that the people who should have stood beside me were now taking the one thing I needed most, the chance to honor him, was like being pushed underwater. I asked Mr. Sanford what exactly they said, hoping I misunderstood. He opened the file on his desk and read their exact words. Gerald had said, "My son's obituary will be handled by the Holt family. His wife is not permitted to publish anything on behalf of our bloodline." My hands shook. I asked if he had corrected them. He apologized and said funeral homes must respect family hierarchy unless legal documents say otherwise. There was nothing formal in the system naming me the sole decision maker. I felt anger rising, the kind that burns from the inside but has nowhere to go. I thanked him for informing me, even though my throat felt tight. I walked out and sat in my car for several minutes. I kept replaying their words. Marcus's wife of 25 years suddenly did not count. The woman who made his meals, celebrated his promotions, and held him through every hardship was suddenly treated like a stranger trying to steal a moment from them. When I drove to their house, my son Logan sat in the passenger seat with his jaw clenched. He told me he did not trust them and that they would try something else. I brushed him off, still half believing they were grieving and not thinking straight. Looking back, I wish I had listened. When we arrived, Tara opened the door before I could knock. She crossed her arms and tilted her head like she had been waiting to argue. Inside the living room, Gerald sat in his recliner with the news playing quietly, ignoring me. Sylvia sat at the dining table with her hands folded neatly, pretending she had no part in this. I asked them why they blocked the obituary. Gerald answered without emotion. He said, "Obituaries come from the real family. You married him, but you are not his lineage." I felt Logan step closer behind me, ready to defend me, but I held up a hand to stop him. I wanted to hear everything they had to say. I told them I was not trying to steal anything. I only wanted to honor my husband. Tara gave a short laugh and said, "You already controlled him enough when he was alive. Let us handle him now." Logan snapped, asking how they could say something that cruel. Sylvia finally looked up at me and said, "You are too emotional. We are trying to protect the family name." Hearing that made something inside me crack. I asked what exactly needed protecting. She paused before answering. "We will not have our son's memory tied to decisions we did not approve." Before I could respond, Logan's phone buzzed. He checked it and his expression changed sharply. He handed me the phone. On the screen was a link to a memorial fund in Marcus's name. At first, I thought it was a tribute they created, something kind. Then I read the page. It said the fund was managed by the Holt family only, and that donations would support chosen family efforts approved by Gerald and Tara. There was no mention of me or Logan, no explanation of how the money would be used, no transparency. A comment section was already filling with people offering condolences and donations. I asked them why they created this fund without telling me. Tara shrugged and said, "People trust us more than they trust you. Your involvement would complicate everything." Gerald added, "We are doing what is best for our son's legacy." My anger finally broke through. I told them Marcus trusted me with everything while he was alive, and that they never acted like they wanted him until now, when money and control were involved. Gerald's voice rose for the first time. "You will not accuse us in our own home. You need to step back before you embarrass yourself." Logan stepped between us and told his grandfather, "You embarrassed yourself the moment you treated my mom like she meant nothing to Dad." We walked out of that house knowing they were not grieving. They were grabbing. They were controlling everything they could, because Marcus was no longer here to tell them no. The betrayal was complete, and the war they started was only beginning. I reached the point where grief stopped being the heaviest thing in my life, and frustration took its place. A sharp, growing pressure that made it impossible to breathe. After leaving my in-laws' house and learning about the memorial fund they created without telling me, I went back home feeling humiliated and strangely restless. Logan tried to comfort me, but I kept brushing him off because at that moment I felt embarrassed for letting them push me around. I kept thinking that maybe if I had handled things differently, if I had been calmer or smarter or less emotional, none of this would have spiraled. I hated that I started blaming myself instead of them. The house felt too quiet. Marcus's shoes were still by the door. His jacket hung on the chair. I sat in the living room surrounded by things that belonged to a man who no longer existed, and for the first time since his death, anger gave me more strength than sadness. I decided to gather everything I needed to write an obituary on my own and submit it to the newspaper before his family could block me again. I went into Marcus's office, a room he used for grading papers and paying bills, and opened drawers looking for documents that listed his achievements. I found old certificates, photos of him with students, and letters from community groups thanking him for his help. Each piece reminded me of how much he had given to others, and how wrong it was that the people who gave him the least in life were now trying to control him in death. As I searched through a stack of binders, a thin envelope slipped out and fell onto the floor. My name was written on the front in his handwriting. My heart stopped. I sat on the carpet and opened it. Inside was a letter Marcus wrote months earlier, a letter I never knew about, a letter that changed everything. He wrote that he feared his parents would try to push me aside if anything happened to him. He said he trusted only me to handle his memorial, his tribute, and any public statements. He wrote that his parents cared more about their image than his happiness, and that if they tried to override me, I should stand firm, no matter how ugly it became. Reading those lines made me cry harder than I had since the hospital. It felt like he reached through the veil of his own death and pulled me back to my feet. I realized I had been letting his parents twist the truth while ignoring the one voice that mattered most, his. With the letter in hand, something inside me shifted. The fear I felt around Gerald and Tara began to fade. I stood up and told Logan we were going to honor his father properly, even if I had to fight every step. I contacted the newspaper office and asked about placing a tribute. When the editor explained their sizes and formats, I listened quietly before saying I wanted the largest placement they had, a full-page Sunday feature, the type everyone in town would see, the type that would stand louder than anything his parents tried to hide. The cost was high, higher than what I felt comfortable with, but when I hesitated, the editor told me I sounded like someone fighting to protect something important. That was all I needed to hear. I took a deep breath and told her to run it. All night, I worked on the tribute. I included the best photo from our wedding, the one where Marcus was lifting my veil slightly and laughing at something I said. I wrote about the students he mentored, the families he helped, the lives he touched. Then I ended it with the line that came straight from my pain and my love. Beloved husband, loyal father, a man whose true family chose him in life and honored him in death. Logan read it and nodded without saying a word. That silence told me he understood. Before submitting everything, I sent the newspaper a copy of the letter Marcus wrote to me, not to attack anyone, but to protect myself from anything his family might try next. The editor thanked me and assured me the tribute would run exactly as I requested. I turned off my computer and let my hands fall into my lap. For the first time since Marcus died, the knots in my chest loosened. I knew his parents would be furious. I knew they would lash out. I knew the next part of this battle would be ugly. But for the first time, I felt ready for it. I was done begging. I was done trying to earn a place in a family that never wanted me. From that moment on, everything I did would be for Marcus and no one else. And if his parents wanted a war, I was finally prepared to show them exactly who they underestimated. The morning the tribute ran, I woke before sunrise with a tight feeling in my chest, a mix of fear and something sharper, something close to triumph. Logan drove with me to the convenience store because he wanted to be there when I saw it for the first time. I walked straight to the newspaper rack and pulled the top copy free, and when I saw that full-page tribute staring back at me, I felt my knees weaken. Marcus's smile filled the entire page, the same smile he gave me the day we started our life together. The words I wrote sat below him like a final truth carved into stone. I whispered his name and touched the print lightly, careful not to smudge the ink. People passing through the store paused to look at it. One woman put her hand over her heart. A man shook his head slowly and said he remembered Marcus from coaching his nephew. For a moment, I felt peace. Then Logan's phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again and again. I could tell by the way he stared at the screen that the storm was starting. By the time we got home, Tara was already banging on my front door. I could hear her shouting before I even unlocked it. She pushed her way inside, holding the newspaper in one hand and her phone in the other. Her face was twisted with anger, her voice sharp enough to cut the air. She screamed that I had humiliated her family, that I had taken something sacred from them, that I had made them look cruel. I told her calmly that they did not need my help to look cruel. They managed that perfectly on their own. Logan stepped between us, telling her to leave. She ignored him and shoved the newspaper at me, yelling that the sentence, "True family honored him in death," was a direct attack on her mother. I told her it was the truth. She lost control completely. She shouted that I had no right to speak for Marcus when he came from them, not me. Hearing that pushed something deep inside me past its limit. I told her Marcus chose me. He married me. He built a life with me. He trusted me. That trust lived longer than any of their bloodline pride ever would. Before she could respond, my phone rang. It was a reporter from the local paper. She said she needed to speak with me urgently. I stepped away from Tara and answered the call. The reporter told me that the Holt family had attempted to submit their own version of an obituary, a version that practically erased my existence from Marcus's life. They wrote that he remained closest to his birth family and cherished their traditions above all. The reporter explained that they flagged the submission because of the letter I had provided earlier. Not only had the Holt version been rejected, but the staff was now aware of a family dispute regarding representation, which made the situation even more sensitive. I felt the shock roll through me. They had tried to overwrite his life with a lie. They were furious that their plan had been stopped before reaching the public. When I hung up, Tara demanded to know what the call was about. I told her their fake obituary had been blocked for being misleading. She went pale, then red, then somewhere in between. Gerald called moments later, and when I answered, his voice was low and cold. He accused me of sabotaging the family's tribute. He said I had embarrassed them in the community. He said I overstepped my place. I told him my place was written in a letter his son wrote by hand. I told him I would no longer allow anyone to bury Marcus's truth along with his body. Gerald snapped, calling me ungrateful and dramatic. The call ended when he shouted that I would regret crossing him. The breaking point arrived when Tara accused me of stealing donations from their memorial fund. That accusation was the final push I needed. I walked to my computer and opened the document where I had saved Marcus's letter. Then, without hesitating, I posted the photo of the letter publicly on my social media, along with a clear explanation of what happened. I wrote that the Holt family had blocked my obituary, created a memorial fund without my consent, and attempted to push out a false tribute. I wrote that Marcus trusted me to speak for him. I attached the letter and the full-page tribute. Within minutes, the post spread. People commented, shared their anger, and expressed support. Messages poured in from Marcus's students, co-workers, and friends. They wrote stories of how he helped them, praised the tribute, and condemned his family's behavior. The Holt family's version of events collapsed instantly. Tara saw the post while standing in my living room. Her face froze. Then she grabbed her keys and left without another word. My phone buzzed once more. A final message from Gerald appeared. "You will never hear from us again." I stared at the message, then deleted it. For the first time since Marcus died, I felt a steady breath fill my lungs. The fight they started had ended, not with me losing my place, but with them losing access to the story they tried to control. The truth was out, and their power was gone. In the days that followed the public blowout with the Holt family, the house became strangely calm, almost too calm, as if everything inside it had been holding its breath until the truth finally came out. I expected guilt, sadness, maybe even regret, but what I felt instead was a gradual release, like someone had taken a heavy strap off my chest and allowed me to breathe for the first time since Marcus died. The silence from his parents and sister was loud at first, ringing in my ears like a warning, but the more time passed, the more that silence felt like the beginning of something cleaner, something without their claws embedded in every choice I made. Logan noticed it too. He said the house felt lighter. He started spending more time at home, cooking meals or sitting with me in the living room where Marcus and I used to talk late into the night. He seemed relieved in a way that made me realize how deeply the Holt's behavior had affected him as well. I had been so wrapped up in defending myself that I forgot how much he had endured, watching his father's family dismiss me and dismiss him at the same time. The community responded to the posted letter and tribute with unexpected warmth. Cards arrived at the door. Meals were dropped off. Parents of Marcus's former students wrote long messages about how he changed their children's lives. One teacher sent me a framed photo of Marcus helping a group of kids build a science project. That photo now sits on the entry table where Gerald used to glare at our wedding pictures. A local counselor reached out and said she admired how I defended Marcus's legacy, a kindness I never expected. People asked about the memorial fund and how they could donate safely now that the Holt version was suspended. When I explained that I planned to use donations to support a scholarship for students pursuing education or science, the support only grew. I opened a legitimate fund in Marcus's honor, completely transparent, with every dollar tracked publicly. It felt like reclaiming the parts of him they tried to take. It felt like telling the world that his life still had purpose beyond their bitterness. Despite the support, I could not stop thinking about the Holts and the choices they made. I wondered how things could have been different. I wondered if grief broke something inside them, something that made them grasp for control in the worst possible way. But every time I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, I remembered Gerald saying I should step back because I was embarrassing myself. I remembered Tara pushing her way into my home and screaming that I had humiliated them. I remembered Sylvia calling me emotional while she let her husband and daughter treat me like an obstacle. I remembered the fund they created without my permission, collecting money under Marcus's name as if he were a product they could sell. Grief may twist people, but cruelty is a choice, and they chose it again and again long before Marcus died. The regret I thought I would feel never came. What came instead was clarity. I decided to remove their presence from our home, not out of spite, but out of peace. I boxed up old gifts they had given us, photos where they stood stiff and disapproving, and anything that reminded me of their constant criticism. When Logan walked into the living room and saw the boxes, he nodded with a quiet understanding. We carried everything to the garage, and I felt lighter with each step. That night, for the first time since the hospital, I slept without waking up in a panic. I dreamed of Marcus sitting on the edge of the bed, smiling the way he did when he wanted to reassure me without saying a word. When I woke up, I realized the dream did more than comfort me. It reminded me that everything I had done, every fight I took on, every painful moment I pushed through, was for him and for the life we built together. Weeks passed, and the Holt family stayed silent. They did not call. They did not text. They did not show up to reclaim anything. The town began to realize their absence was not just distance, but shame. People noticed their lies, their attempt to twist Marcus's memory, and their obsession with control. They faded from community life, attending fewer events and withdrawing from social circles that once respected them. Their desire to protect the Holt image ended with them ruining it themselves. That was the final revenge. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a fight, not a victory yelled in someone's face, but the slow collapse of their own false reputation. They tried to erase me from Marcus's story, and instead they erased themselves from everyone else's respect. In the end, the aftermath taught me a truth I did not expect. Blood does not make you family. Love does. Respect does. The willingness to stand beside someone, especially when life falls apart, does. I honored Marcus the way he would have wanted, with honesty, clarity, and a voice that could not be silenced by people who never truly knew him. And even though grief still hits me in waves, I feel proud knowing that when his family tried to take everything from me, I fought back with truth, and truth won. If you stayed with me through this story, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I want to hear your thoughts, and I appreciate you being here.